Well, I came into the school that I'm currently at, Galvez Middle School, just after graduating college, so I had no teaching experience. It was my first job, and I came into a program that was in need of some help. It wasn't a very good situation, but I came in, I changed some things and started some good trends and some good ideas there. And I used the Standard of Excellence method book with all my 6th grade students, just because that's what all the band directors around the area that I was in were already using, and I kind of used that when I grew up. And I think that we had a class set. It was kind of a no-brainer. So I used that book, and it seemed to work well. I had some good results and some students who were doing good things. So I used the same thing the following year, and it worked fine. I didn't see any problem with it because that's kind of the way I grew up. Whole notes and whole rests at the beginning, and every line had a number with it, and cute little songs that the kids could learn. And it was it seemed to me, the normal experience of 6th grade, kind of beginning band.
And you did that for 2 years?
Right. Yeah, I used that for 2 years.
And so, as far as you were concerned, that all seemed to do what you wanted a method book to do.
Right. That's what it should do. That was normal.
Yeah.
That was the way I grew up, and I turned out pretty well.
Yeah.
So it must work.
Yeah.
And that was the way everybody else was doing it.
Yeah.
So they must, have the right idea also.
Mm-hmm.
And I was young. I wasn't about to, go out and, you're against the norm and against the grain and try something that was, completely radical right away.
Yeah.
With all my colleagues kind of looking at me like, what's this new kid trying?
But how was that second year different from the third year in terms of the expectations?
I think my first 2 years teaching, I felt like my expectations were high. Coming from a good musical background, I knew what to expect of students, and I wanted them to accomplish certain goals, which I thought were good. And I wanted to teach the Standard of Excellence book as well as anybody would teach it.
Sure.
We weren't just banging through lines and playing along with CDs. We were still talking about beauty of sound and about phrasing and breathing. It was just, that wasn't a fundamental part of what we were doing every day. That was a part of, line 23 was, okay, we should not breathe after 4 bars, or maybe we should, or maybe we should add some dynamics. And then the book kind of, told you that we should add some dynamics. So it was like, all right, now let's start talking about dynamics, and now let's start talking about tuning just before the concert so we can make sure we're all in tune. But with the Habits of Musicianship, I really found like I had to do those things every single day. They were a part of my teaching.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't a day that didn't, that went by that we didn't talk about some sort of expression in the music. The music in the Habits of Musicianship, it's real music, and the students are trying to convey something. They're trying to convey emotion or a mood, or they're trying to do something. Whereas, time for 2, T for whatever it is in the Standard of Excellence books, whole notes and half rests, that doesn't really convey too much unless you work really hard, as a musician to make it so it doesn't really lend itself to that kind of interpretation. Whereas I found this stuff in Habits of Musicianship, putting a fermata over a rest, in the very, first few songs of the book, fermata over rest, that really gives the students the time to create tension and drama and think about what the audience is going to be thinking while they're waiting and getting ready to play the next beat. And that makes music more interesting for the kids. And that's real music, that's real stuff. So I think that's, the biggest difference between my second year teaching and my third year teaching is, my second year teaching, I was doing all those things, but only when it called for it, or when I thought, that it was about time. In my third year teaching, when I was using the habits approach, I was trying to do that stuff every single day.
Yeah. What did you have to change in just the way you thought about all this to teach from that?
A lot about realizing the potential in my students and what they were really capable of. It's like, what should a 6th grade student know and be able to do? And what I found was that my standards were far too low. I thought, they were all only capable of certain things. And for me, this book really kind of showed me that, they are capable of much more, and you should expect much more from your students. So kind of me going through that journey and saying, all right, well, how far can I push them? And how much can I expect them to improve in 1 year and in 1 day and in 1 class period? And what kind of sound should I expect to come from my students? And, and the book kind of really guided me in the right direction and kind of what to expect and the pacing and some different things like that. Although for me, it was very radical to, start in a completely different, day 1 was different. Everything I did was different that year.
Yeah.
So it was really kind of a journey of just figuring out what my students were capable of and what I should be doing in return.
Yeah.
When I saw, some of the first few tunes, and it was, to me, quarters, eighths, and repeat signs and all this stuff, I was like, how am I going to pull this off?
Yeah.
And I had to really think about that. But really, that's not a hard concept. It's only hard because we make it hard and we introduce it later to children. But really, if you show kids a picture of a quarter note and say, all right, make one sound when you see one of these, and eighth notes, make two sounds when you see some of these, kids get that, and you can put them in combinations of such. So really, the rhythmic aspect and all the, da capo, all that stuff, repeat signs, trematas, that was very natural. I mean, kids grasp that, real quickly, because you made it easy. I mean, if you make it easy, they'll think it's easy. It's a sound production that you have to get them to think is hard, so they'll take it seriously.
Yeah.
It's not easy to play a G on the clarinet, but when you get down to that, that's your reward.
Yeah.
So we definitely spend a lot more time on the physical, playing without music stands or books.
Uh-huh.
And for me, I mean, learning to teach that way and learning to expect a lot more from the students and get really more involved with a lot of more musical ideas at an earlier time in the year and earlier, time in their learning became much more natural. Over the course of the year, it became a lot more interesting to teach a student about, a phrase or about inflection or about emotion than it was to teach them about the technique behind Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. So I really, kind of fell in love with the method because I got to be much more natural in the classroom and talk about what was interesting to me as a musician, because I wanted them to be musicians also.
Yeah.
Rather than me just being a teacher and them just being a band student. It was a band student is a musician, and they are two different things. Whereas before, 6th grade beginning band was getting you ready to be a musician.
Some feedback from your students at the end of the year because you asked them some questions. What was the nature of that feedback as it related to this early period where you didn't just put the instruments together and start?
Well, every kid, usually who takes band class, signs up, and it's their choice. It's them and their parents. They sign up, and they want to take band class, and they definitely have some expectations in mind. They're going to buy a shiny instrument and learn how to play Happy Birthday, and they're gonna, play Jingle Bells at Christmas, and they have some expectations that go along with that. And so for me, it was a struggle to keep my kids motivated and learning about, this is music, and we're gonna get to all that stuff. We're gonna play Happy Birthday, but when we play it, it's gonna sound really good. I'm not just gonna teach you the notes. So at the end of the year, I kind of asked my students, well, how did band differ, from what your expectations were about it coming in, and what did you think about band? If you were telling a new 6th grade student, what would you tell them about band class and what it's like? And there was more than one student. There was a lot of students who said it wasn't what I expected at all. The first few weeks of instructions, I was kind of hesitant about going on. Maybe I wanted to quit because this was not what band was supposed to be about. I didn't sign up for this, basically. I signed up for all that other stuff, and that's not what they got in the first few weeks at all. But I think my students agreed that in the long run, their outcomes were much more valuable than anything else that they had expected. They all signed up for band next year, 98% retention with the 6th grade. So I think my students realized that even though it's not what they expected, it's maybe better because now they can have the potential to be a musician and make music forever, rather than just happening to go through 18 weeks of instruction or so and learn how to play Happy Birthday, and that's all they get to come out with it on the other end.
Yeah. Can I just ask you just one thing about the 98% retention? So would you just say for everybody's benefit, so how many students started 6th grade band, and how many students then are going into 7th grade band?
I think there was about 105 students that started 6th grade band, and I'll have about 100, 102 next year in the 7th grade band. So the students are getting some sort of reward that makes them want to come back for more.